I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquia, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
And a very good evening and welcome to Farage at 7 o'clock here on GB News this Monday evening. Well, yes, we've got an action-packed, full-on show for the next hour. So that's it. The government have taken back control. There's James Cleverly with his new 5-point plan to bring immigration under control that they lost control of. You get that? That's the first bit of the show. In the second bit of the show, I have got a huge scoop. I'm going to talk to you about a massive, massive illegal migrant working scandal here in the UK. You may have seen this video on social media. I'm going to be talking about what does that all mean, what's it going on, how it's depressing British workers, as well as, frankly, depressing me. And then, of course, he's still there. He's in the jungle, but goodness me, Nigel, he's under threat. It's voting time. All of that after the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Richard, thank you. Good evening to you. Well, the top story from the GB newsroom tonight is that the Home Secretary, as you've been hearing, says 300,000 fewer people will be able to come to the UK every year under new plans to bring down legal migration. Overseas workers and students will also be stopped from bringing their family with them. The minimum salary required for a skilled worker will also rise to £38,700 from next spring. James Cleverly was outlining his plans in the House of Commons this afternoon and said the measures are the best way forward for British taxpayers.
It's about making sure that we control immigration, that we stop abuses of the system, but we also protect the economics that underpin our society and our country, and also, of course, support the people who work in our health and social care sectors.
Cleverly, well, the Shadow Environment Secretary Steve Reid said taxpayers have heard it all before.
How many times have we heard a succession of Conservative Home Secretaries stand up in the chamber of the House of Commons and tell us how much they're going to decrease migration by, only to see it soar in the following few months? Now, the figure that James Cleverly is talking about there, even if he manages to cut it by the amount that he's just said, and I doubt that, given their track record, even then, migration would be around double the level that it was in December 2019 when they told us they were going to cut it.
Staying with politics, and Sir Keir Starmer said today a Labour government wouldn't put more pressure on taxpayers. He was speaking in London early on this morning, and he pledged his ministers would be ruthless when it came to public spending. That's after he accused the Tories of letting public finances deteriorate. But he promised Labour would be obsessed, he said, with economic growth. Now, the Prime Minister said today the BBC should be realistic about licence fee increases. The fee is currently £159 a year, but it's thought the corporation wants to hike the charge to £173. The Culture Secretary, Lucy Fraser, says the planned rise would be very high amid the cost of living pressures. GB News understands the broadcaster could be forced to accept a lower increase. Almost £17 billion is missing from the government's military budget. That's according to the National Audit Office, which has called the government's plans to purchase new weapons over the next decade as unaffordable. It's due to costs rising by 27%, outstripping a budget increase of more than £46 billion. But the government says it is committed to increasing defence spending. And the north of England is set to get extra money to improve its rail services. Ministers are promising to invest almost £4 billion to upgrade the Trans-Pennine route connecting Manchester, Huddersfield, Leeds and York. That's after the Prime Minister scrapped the northern leg of HS2 between Manchester and Birmingham earlier on this year. You're with GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. This is Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Farage on GB News. Do you remember that slogan? Take back control. We heard it time and time again in 2016. We heard it in the general election of 2019. We've sort of heard it quite a lot ever since. But today, the new slogan from the new Home Secretary is, enough is enough. Yes, that's because the government took back control of the immigration policy and allowed it to go out of control, completely out of control. So the Home Secretary now says, enough's enough, I'm going to take back control with the biggest ever reduction in immigration this country has ever seen. He's going to reduce it by some 300,000 people per annum. To which I'd politely remind him that back in 2019, they said they would get it below 200,000. So he's talking about a reduction 50% bigger than the maximum they were talking about as a government back in the first place. But that's OK. We all make mistakes. Let's just look at the detail of the government's new, latest plan, 5-point plan. The Prime Minister likes 5-point plans. Well, Mr Cleverly's plan is he's going to stop health and care worker bringing dependents. He's going to increase the skilled workers earning threshold by a third, from about £26,000 up to £38,000 700, to bring it nearer to sort of the median full-time wage. He's going to scrap cut price labour by stopping the shortage occupation list that they created a couple of years ago, and that wouldn't be able to pay 20% less to bring in overseas workers. This was their scheme a couple of years ago. They're going to raise the family income for family visas, the minimum income, to £38,000 £700, and ensure that the Migration Advisory Committee's reviews the graduate immigration route to prevent abuse. Well, that all sounds very credible, Home Secretary. Thank you very much. When's it going to start, Home Secretary? To which the answer came, spring. It's now December. It's pretty chilly. I'm pretty sure the next month is January. Why, Home Secretary, isn't it going to start on the 1st of January? If it's enough is enough and it's a problem, why don't you get on with it? Why wait? So what do you think will happen between now and the spring, which of course has a certain period of time to it, so it might be the end of spring? Do you think that maybe actually there's going to be a surge of people from all over the world who are going to say, watch out, the rules are changing, get your visa application in now, get it sorted, get in before the change? Yes, I think that's a fairly reasonable assumption, don't you? So we're going to have a surge, I suspect, between now and the spring. And I suspect that surge will be another 700,000 people getting visas to come and live in the UK. And what this report, his plan, his 5-point plan, maybe there weren't enough points to deal with the increase in student numbers that's almost trebled in the last 4 years from under 200,000 to 500,000 plus the dependents. So the student numbers will, in fact, they will grow. The master's numbers will grow. I'll be talking about that later in the week. You may remember 10 days ago I talked about some of the strange master's degrees and what's going on there. I've got some news for you later on that. The graduate visa doesn't seem to change. That's the back door way into the front door into the United Kingdom. That's not going to change, so that will go up. And there seems to be no change that I can see to the skilled worker list, which, by the way, has some 200 occupations with some 800 job titles. So there we are, folks. That's it. The new Home Secretary, enough is enough. He's asking you to trust him. So my question to you, quite reasonably, I think, is do you trust the government to reduce net migration? That's the question. Do you trust the government to reduce net migration? Email me, farage@gbnews.com, or tweet #Farage on GB News. Well, obviously, an important part of net migration is the ability for skills and people to add value to the economy. So who better to join me now to discuss this plan and whether it's going to help or hinder or be a bit of each is one Jonathan Portis, who's the Professor of Economics at King's College London and, of course, a Senior Fellow at UK in a Changing Europe. Jonathan, thank you so much for joining me. A big announcement from the Home Secretary there today. You've probably just heard my sort of take on it, his 5-point plan, my questions and concerns about what it doesn't do and the timing of it. What are your thoughts, Jonathan? And what are you feeling from an economic perspective? Is that going to have an economic effect or what?
It will have some effect. Remember, the numbers were already coming down. They were lower in the most recent set of figures than in the previous figures. They showed a fall. And that's not surprising because a lot of the big bulge in net migration came first from refugees coming from Ukraine, Hong Kong, and to some extent Afghanistan, and then from, as you said, the ramp up in the number of international students, which of course was a sort of post-COVID, post-pandemic thing, and was part of the government's own strategy to fund universities. Basically, my university and other universities, we use the fees we get from international students to ensure that we can educate British students at less than what it costs us to teach them. So if you start upsetting that, you're basically saying to universities, you're not going to be able to educate British students because you won't have the money to do it. So there's some issues there. But overall, this will bring down numbers further. How much further, it's unclear. The biggest single change was this not allowing people who come here to work in social care to bring dependents. And I think you sort of have to ask yourself, do we as a country think it's fine to say to somebody who comes to work in an investment bank, sure, of course, you can bring your spouse and your kid, but somebody who comes to work in a care home, which of course we need to look after your parents or my parents, no, you can't bring your kid, you can't bring your spouse.
But it's like the question, Jonathan, about why do graduates need to bring dependents? And you've seen a huge increase in the number of dependents, up 7-fold, with students, as you say, international students. I mean, when I went to university, I didn't take my girlfriend up to the university when I did a degree.
Well, undergraduates can't, remember. We're talking about postgraduates here. But I agree. I think the case for looking at which types of students can bring dependents is pretty strong, and certainly a lot stronger than it is for care workers. And I don't think that there's, the government has changed those rules somewhat, but I think that in itself is perfectly reasonable, actually. I think it's much harder to justify it for people in the care sector when we expect them to come and
I'm just picking up on that.
Years.
The thing is, though, we've got the biggest population, a record population the country's ever had. We've got a record number of people on out-of-work benefits, and yet we're constantly told we need to bring in more international labour in order to make our economy work. To which my simple point is,
actually, that's a bit of a.
we've got
you
the
say
biggest.
we've got a record number of people on out-of-work benefits. Actually, that's wrong. We had more people on out-of-work benefits in the 1990s, and considerably more as a proportion of our population, even though immigration was very low.
You think we had more than 5.2 million, 1 in 8 of the working age population?
Absolutely. Remember, I used to work for the Department of Work and Pensions. I know these numbers very well. I can promise you that they were it was higher in the early and mid 90s. And considerably higher.
If that's right, Jonathan, but we had net migration then of averaging about 100,000 a year, and our health and social care system was working rather well. So why now do we need net migration of 500, 600,000, and yet still we haven't got enough people in the health system? It doesn't compute to me.
Well, actually, our health and social care system wasn't working particularly well in the mid-90s.
A lot better than it is now.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right there. In the 2000s, when we invested in health and social care and put up spending a lot, some of it was wasted, but a lot of it wasn't. We did reduce waiting lists, and we didn't have the NHS, of course, has always had migrant workers, and it had some in the 2000s, but not nearly as many as now. And certainly, we didn't have this complete collapse in domestic recruitment in the care system. And there, the problem is very clear. The government has not invested in training, development, and pay for people in the care system. So, as a consequence, we are bringing in people from abroad, often on low wages, often treated very well. But I think the important thing to remember here is this is not the migration system causing low wages. This is the low wages causing migration, low wages that the government chooses to pay.
It's not the government paying low wages, it's big business who says we don't want to pay more wages, so we need more cheap international labour to depress British wages.
No, that's not really the case, remember. The low wage, the health and social care sector...
But big business in the private sector is constantly saying, I need more cheap overseas labour in order to make the economy grow, but there's no economic growth, so it's flawed.
But wait a minute. The current system... outside the health and social care sector, the current system doesn't allow people to come in except at a skill level and salary threshold. That means they're not cheap, low-skilled labourers. You remember, in fact, what my research has shown is that actually the average earnings of migrants since we introduced the new post-Brexit system, which of course you supported very strongly for precisely this reason, since we did that, the earnings of the people who come on skilled work visas, the earnings of new migrant workers has been going up relative to the British population. These are not low-skilled, low-paid
But Jonathan,
workers.
on the skilled worker list, there's 200 job titles, of which the lowest is a seamstress at £16,000 a year, which is about half the annual wage. So I'm not buying any of that.
And do you know how many seamstresses come in through those visas compared to IT workers, university professionals, bankers, consultants? I can tell you because I've looked at the data, I've looked at the numbers. The people who are coming in.
But the net result is the numbers have gone up hugely, and yet we're told it buys economic growth, and yet we've got flatlining growth. So something doesn't compute, Jonathan.
Oh, well, there's certainly no doubt that there's lots of reasons we can talk about for flat growth, and migration is certainly not the one that most economists would pick. We could start with the after impact of austerity, move on to the impact of Brexit on trade and exports and so on, and continue with 20 years of underinvestment in railroads, public infrastructure and housing.
What, you mean wasting 50 billion quid on HS2?
Well, that's an entirely different argument.
I'm sorry, that is a different point. I hear all these arguments, Jonathan, but fundamentally the British people want growth in their wages, they want growth in the economy, we're not getting it, and we've got mass immigration. Something's not right.
Well, indeed. Let me read back to you something that somebody said to me when the post-Brexit immigration system was introduced, and after it had been introduced for a year. For millions of lower-paid Brits living in Britain receiving good pay rises thanks to Brexit stopping unlimited low-skilled migration. It's a very fine thing. Do you remember that?
I do remember that, but that's not what the government did. And remember, I'm not running the government. If I was, we would have controlled immigration, would have had higher wage growth.
That's what you said.
Absolutely.
A year after the new...
Yeah, but they opened the borders. I wanted to control the numbers, Jonathan. That's exactly the point. If they'd done what I said, we would have had that higher wage growth.
They did exactly what you said. That was a year after the
They didn't take back control, Jonathan. That's the whole point, and that's why they're now saying enough is enough. Jonathan, time is against us. We must get you back on because we've got a fascinating load of stuff to talk about. Thank you so much indeed. Jonathan Porter's there. Very good. He's checked up on what I said, but I stand by what I said. Take back control of the borders. You get higher wage growth for British workers. That's how we all feel better off. Anyway, we've got to go to the break. Coming up after the break, we have got a huge, huge illegal working scandal here in the UK that I am going to raise the lid on. Don't go anywhere. It's GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquia, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, my friends. Well, that was a spicy debate with Jonathan Porter. There's lots more to come up. So, how often do you get a sort of convenience delivery by someone on a motorbike or a bike or fast food or a pizza? And then if you do get those, how often do you check that actually the person delivering it is the same as you were told on your app, on your mobile phone or your iPad? I suspect not a lot. Well, the answer is, folks, between 40 and 50% of the time, it's not the person you were told it is. Just think about that for a moment. Then you might wonder, asylum seekers, when they go into hotels, what do they do all day? I mean, they're not allowed to work. They can read, maybe watch some movies or stuff, but they're not allowed to work. But when you go to those hotels in the middle of the day, there's no one there. They've all gone. Where do you think they've gone? So here's the thing. I'll tell you where they're going. They're going to work. Because when they arrive at a hotel, they get given, I'm told by charities, they get given a push bike. That's very nice. So with the push bike, what they're doing is actually they're going to start working for some of these delivery companies. That there is a picture of hundreds of bikes at a hotel in the Midlands, all push bikes. That was about the middle of the day. It was a filthy day when I was there checking this out. And the reason that those push bikes are all still there, but there's no one in the hotel, is because what's happening is that people with delivery accounts for all the big delivery companies, the Deliveroos, the Just Eats, the Uber Eats, legitimate UK citizens, they get these accounts. But then people have worked out you can rent them for between £50 to £70 a week. That's the going rate. If you look online, you'll see lots and lots of adverts that look a bit like this. That's one, and there's hundreds of these all over social media. The general rate, as I say, is between £50 and £70 a week. And so what happens is that the asylum seekers are renting these accounts because they don't have bank accounts, they're not allowed to work. And so they then get given the login details on the app for these fast food deliveries. They then go and do the deliveries. Now, they've got no costs, they don't have any tax to pay. So very quickly, using their push bikes, within 2 or 3 weeks, they've got enough cash to go and buy an e-bike, which of course means that they can deliver much faster. That was in the same town. That's a whole group of e-bikes outside a food court in a shopping centre where I went to see this going on. So with the e-bikes, you're going that much faster to deliver it, which means you can earn more through the day. But of course, this is not legal, but they're able to do it. What's the net effect of this? You might say, well, what's wrong with that? I'll tell you what's wrong with that, is that when you've got a huge increase in the number of people doing this in a town, the price, the delivery price, drops dramatically. So someone I spoke to in that town in the Midlands, who used to be earning, a British citizen was earning £180 a day doing these fast food deliveries. All of a sudden, the migrant hotel fills up, they're working illegally, they're getting their e-bikes. This person only had a push bike. She obviously has costs to pay. She has tax to pay. So her earnings went from £180 a day down to £50 a day. At which point she said, this is not fair. I'm earning less than if I go on benefits. So she went back on benefits. You see what's happening here? This is illegal. It's not right. So you've got the asylum seekers renting the accounts. You've also got British citizens making a whole load of extra cash on the side, 50, 60, 70 pounds a week for one account, then opening 10 accounts. Nice work if you can get it. I wonder if the taxman sees any of that. So this is taking jobs from British workers and it is depressing wages. Now, just take a look at this, which has been out on social media. This is Omar, this little video here. This is Omar in Europe, having quite a nice time. Looks like it's some island. This is him in a shopping centre. We've blocked out. There he is. He looks pretty well-dressed, comfortable Omar. He's sort of skimming some... there he is, sort of sitting on some grass. He looks pretty happy. He's pretty safe. And there he is. It's Paris. Yes, there's the Eiffel Tower. Very nice indeed. And then he comes on a boat. And I think we've got some footage of Omar on a boat. We've blocked out his face for legal reasons, but he is on a boat coming across the English Channel. There he is. There's other people on the boat. We'll come back. There's another part of that story I'm going to come back to tomorrow, a different element to this. And then the last video I've got for you is Omar in this very same hotel in the Midlands. And there he is. And that is, ladies and gentlemen, that is 20 and £10 notes that he's earned, I believe, illegally, working on these fast food companies, working in fast food shops. Yes, there he is. And look at all that cash. So no costs, loads of cash, no tax, and British workers having their wages depressed. This is really, really serious. And this is going on all over the country, where there are migrant hotels and fast food outlets nearby. And the scale of this, of the 150,000+ people, the backlog, who are not yet allowed to work, my gut is 100,000+ could well be illegally working. £2,000 a person lost tax revenue, that's 200 million quid. Tens of thousands of British people are not able to earn, they're back on benefits. That's hundreds of millions more. All of this going on. And I believe it's going on with the knowledge and awareness of these massive multinational delivery companies. Absolutely. Because they actually, in their terms and conditions, they say to the main account holder, you can have a substitute account holder as long as it's your responsibility to check they've got the legal right to work. Well, you can guess what's happening, can't you? I think they are complicit with this. And I think this is a huge, huge issue. And that we're all losing out, the Treasury's losing out, we're paying more tax. Well, I'm delighted now to be joined down the line by Max Winthrop, who is the Chair of Employment Law at the Law Society and also a partner at Sintons LLP. Max, thank you so much for joining me. This is an extraordinary situation where it appears that the delivery companies, they're saying that self-employment law means that they can't stop the main account holder from essentially organising a substitute to do their work as a self-employed person. That's what they're saying, and I'll read their statement in a minute. Is that really your understanding of self-employed law?
Right, what you're doing here is you're looking at the distinction that we make in the law between three different types of status. So we've got worker, employee, and the genuinely self-employed. Now, how do you define those particular functions? Well, one way of doing it is to say that if you're engaged in a way that gives you that right of substitution, then you are not a worker, you're not an employee, you're genuinely self-employed. And we've seen that demonstrated quite recently in the case involving Deliveroo and the Independent Workers' Union of Great Britain, where the Supreme Court found that the original decision of the Central Arbitration Committee was factually correct, that these were genuine substitution clauses, by which I mean the riders for Deliveroo had an unfettered right to say, OK, don't fancy riding today, I'll get my mate to do it. And the only restriction on that was that if somebody had previously been blacklisted with Deliveroo, then they couldn't be used as a rider. So one can understand why, though, the companies that work in the so-called gig economy do this, because it's one of those just about the only surefire way you can guarantee that that will be a genuine self-employed contract. Anything else, they could be workers entitled to holiday pay, or they could be employees entitled to redundancy pay, and also to rights such as unfair dismissal. OK, so I hear that. But what I've talked about and what I believe they're aware of is that where you've got a substitute who essentially is acting against the law illegally, you've got tax evasion, which is bordering on, I suspect, money laundering regulation. So surely there should be a way where these main companies can say, because of that risk of evasion, we are going to restrict it just to the main account holder. Now, what's a little strange on some of the terms and conditions I've seen is that if you sign up, if you get a job with GB News or whatever, if you look at your contract of employment, it'll have various terms in it. One of those might be that you've got that you're giving a warranty that you've got the right to work in the UK, and you might be asked to produce your passport and other documents such as that. Now, some of the terms and conditions that I've seen don't have any provision for the initial rider or worker, using that word advisedly, to actually prove they've got the entitlement to work at all. And I suppose part of the problem here is that if those kind of gig economy companies are wanting to argue that, well, these are really contractors, nothing to do with us, we just give them a platform to provide them with work, so it's nothing to do with us that we should ensure that they have certain rights and certain obligations. So the gig economy is, I think, kind of a breeding ground for some of these less... Yeah, this is a fast-moving field. It's a very fast-moving field. Max, I'm sorry, time is against us, but thank you so much for your thoughts there with your legal brain on this. It feels to me that something's got to change. This is not acceptable. We are being ripped off.
the Treasury, the taxpayer, are missing out. We invited Just Eat, Deliveroo, Uber Eats to come on the programme to defend themselves, to talk about it. Sadly, no one was available. But they did reply, and I'll sort of try and summarise one of the replies. Deliveroo said they take a zero-tolerance approach towards any rider who fails to meet their legal obligations when working with us. They've introduced facial recognition technology to try and counter abuse and the like, and they're looking at a further registration process. And Just Eat said similar, and that self-employed independent couriers have the legal right to use a substitute. Well, if that's the right, currently, and if that is the case, frankly, the government needs to change the law, because I believe this is completely unacceptable. Well, coming up, slightly more light-hearted after the break, Adam Cherry is down under with the latest from the jungle. How much is Nigel under threat? Don't go anywhere, it's GB News.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquia, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these 3.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Welcome back to Farage on GB News. Well, the great man, he's under threat down under because voting has started. He needs your votes if he is to survive. Let's head straight down there. Adam Cherry, GB News reporter. Hi, Adam. So, what was the summary of last night when some extraordinary things I saw went on? And what can we look forward to this evening, Adam?
Good morning, good evening, Richard. Yeah, it's a big day in the jungle, the first eviction. Frankie Dettori on his way home, and we're just a couple of hours away from finding out who is joining him. Last night was an interesting night for the campmates. We saw a slightly different side to Nigel last night because all the campmates received their letters from home. So this is the first time they've had any contact with their friends and family since joining the jungle. Nigel's letter was written by his children, and they said, "We are not not shocked at you effortlessly sinking those dirty pints. Sorry you couldn't be here to celebrate Tom's birthday, Tom's his son, and a proper Farage lunch. And you see Nigel Farage obviously pretty moved by that. If you're from Westminster, you're probably familiar with a proper Farage lunch. They're legendary around SW1. Usually because if you have a proper Farage lunch, you have to keep your diary commitments quite light in the afternoon. Elsewhere, we had this strange moment yesterday. It's been sunny on the Gold Coast for the last few days, very sunny, 30 degrees. So Nigel thought, you know what, screw it, I'm going to go sunbathing too. So joined the rest of his campmates catching some rays, and Fred and Marvin said, Nigel, have you got a nipple piercing? Quite a strange moment. I think, as Nigel said in the diary room, they've been getting a bit too much sunshine, because I can confirm, my official jungle sources can confirm, that the man does not have a nipple piercing. So quite a strange moment, but look, at least we're having a little bit of fun. Today's going to be another sunny day on the Gold Coast, so maybe there's more of that. As I say, we're a couple of hours away from finding out who's second to leave, or second to be eliminated from the camp. I'm doing my bit for the Vote Remain campaign.
You're doing your bit there, Adam.
So,
that looks absolutely fantastic. Lots to look forward to. Adam, thank you so much indeed. Goodness me, I can't believe they actually asked Nigel, of all people, whether he had his nipple pierced. I mean, they're almost asking me if he had a tattoo. I can confirm that I have neither. No surprise there, probably. Well, I'm delighted now to be joined down the line by Pat Sharp, legendary radio, TV producer, and, of course, a former I'm a Celebrity contestant back in 2011. Pat, thanks for joining us. Do you miss it? Do you have sort of regrets? Are you sort of hankering after where Nigel's at?
Oh, absolutely, Richard. I mean, you know, doing the jungle is a one-off, isn't it? You're one of a sort of class of 250 people who've ever done it, so you feel very special having been asked to do it. And you do watch it, and you do miss it every time. You go, hang on a minute, that's my bed. Who's sleeping in my bed?
Will it be?
You do miss it.
At this time of the competition, as people are being voted out, Pat, how nervous will you be? Or is there a certain sense of relief? You're starving, hungry, you need some creature comforts, you want out of there?
Well, for me, it was slightly different because I was actually not voted out. I was in a sort of a bounce-off sort of trial, and you'll probably remember this. Even if you didn't watch it that year, Richie, you'll have heard about this. So I was on with Fatima Whitbread, and as you know, she's pretty tough. And it was the one where the cockroach went up her nose, and then 10 minutes later came out of her mouth. And then I had to follow her in the same trial with hundreds of those cockroaches, or thousands actually, in the big goldfish bowl in our heads. So it was pretty famous. I think it was voted the second most iconic TV moment of 2011 after Will and Kate's kiss on the balcony.
It was quite a moment, Pat. We had Fatima in here about a week ago. And just finally, Pat, what about the boredom factor? How bad is that?
That's the real thing, Richard. You sit there, you get bored, and that's when you say all sorts of things that you think, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said that. But it's certainly part of it, and that's where they probably catch you out with some of the editing. But I think Nigel's holding himself well. I came on his Talking Pint show in the summer with him, and he was a really good guy. I really enjoyed chatting with him, and it was good to come on GB News and chat with him there. So I hope he does well.
Fantastic. Pat, thank you so much indeed for those reflections. Goodness me, that sounds horrific. The competition between Pat there and Fatima Whitbread. That's probably worth downloading on YouTube and taking another look at that. Now, of course, let's just remember, tonight is the night. You've got to vote. I think we might even have the QR code. There it is. Scan it, vote it. You've got 5 votes if you have it on the app. I've already voted for this evening. Very important. Make Nigel king of the jungle. Absolutely, for sure. Now, the BBC want to increase their prices. Surprise, surprise. So we've got the greatest person to talk about that, a BBC debate about the licence fee. And, of course, to finish off, we've got a new Nigel jungle song. Stay with us. It's GB News.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, my friends, to the last segment of the show this evening. Well, of course, the BBC, they want to increase the licence fee, and apparently the Prime Minister thinks that that may not be the right thing to do in a cost of living crisis. The current fee is £159 a year. The BBC are talking about increasing it by 9% to £173.30. You might think that's great value, you might think it's not good value, you might want to change the system, but is this the right time to have a massive increase? Well, who better to discuss this with than one Martin Bell, OBE, Ambassador for British UNICEF, and of course, former BBC war correspondent, former independent politician. Do you remember when he won Tatton and became an independent member of Parliament from 1997 to 2001 in that glorious, immaculate green suit? He's here with me in the studio. He's still looking glorious and immaculate. Martin, great to have you with me. Thank you for joining us. This obviously is a big increase that the BBC is talking about. It provides a huge range of services. Is it justifiable? People, every pound counts at the moment. What do you think?
I think it's a very difficult time for the BBC to be asking for an increase of that scale. But having said that, I believe the BBC provides something that nobody else does. When I first joined it, it was only 40 years old. Now it's 100 years old. It is looked up to throughout the world. It's a projection of British soft power, which nobody else can match. It's hugely imitated all over the world. I'm, of course, a BBC partisan. I risked my life for it.
Yes.
I love it to death, so don't expect me to be neutral.
No, absolutely. And I guess the question is, it's really important. We'll come back to the soft power, because you talk about, they're asking for £173. So if Netflix is £96 a year, Disney is £96, Amazon Prime is £108 with a few other goodies thrown in. You could say that, do they spend their money well, or like me, thinking, actually, there's quite a lot of bloated, complacent waste in there that could be could be cut back? What do you think?
Well, since I left to become a member of Parliament, I've been a critical friend, let's put it like that. I think there has been in the past a tendency to try to do too much, too often, to overstretch. I think the time might be coming for a little trimming here and there, but I think it would be hugely damage our national interest if we cut the BBC to the core in its primary functions, which are information and entertainment.
Because actually, it's really interesting. Many people may not realise it's got 53 radio stations. The World Service, which comes back to the soft power point you raised, is produced in 42 different languages, and there are 18 international channels, including BBC Persian, Punjabi, and a thing that I wasn't aware of, a website called BBC Pidgin that opened in 2017. So do you think actually that the soft power, because presumably people all over the world, they don't pay anything, so we, the British taxpayer, through our licence fee, we pay, but is that part of the soft power? And I think I'm right in saying the BBC World Service is about £1 in 10. Is that good value for the soft power that it spreads across the globe?
When you consider it is also in part funded by the Foreign Office, then the Foreign Office believes it is. It is not the voice of the British government. I think it's very important. Yeah. It is the voice of the British people. It is, if I may coin a term, the People's Channel, and it projects.
No, I think
all over the world.
I'm going to have to differ. We're the People's Channel. The BBC is the BBC's channel. That's a serious description crisis. I mean, you've got people like Gary Lineker, a very successful sports personality and presenter with huge sums. I don't know. It just feels to me that it could save a lot of money while still projecting that soft power and consolidating a bit.
I regret to say I was never on the list of the highly paid. Quite the reverse. I think there could be some trimming back of certain presenters' salaries. I'll name no names. But what they found in the past is they let people go, they take the audience with them. And the BBC has to be as audience conscious as you are, because without the size of the audience, it's very difficult to justify.
And where do you see the real value? For example, 53 radio stations. Do you think there's more value in the radio stations for across the country, or actually in what's a growing number of TV channels within the BBC?
I think radio stations internationally are very important. So many of them are in areas of conflict where there is no reliable source of information, and especially in the old shortwave days, all the war zones I've been in, the local people would be tuning in not to CBS, NBC, Moscow radio.
Yes.
It was the BBC, and that is something too vital to lose, I think. Do you agree?
No, I think that is right, but I think when they got themselves into a pickle recently in Gaza with the misdescription there of missile strikes and the refusal to call Hamas a terrorist organisation. I mean, I think that's been very damaging to their reputation. And look, we all make mistakes. My issue there, Martin, is that the leadership failed to recognise that there was a mistake and they'd got the mood wrong and they needed to act and change it.
In that particular case, I think it was very sad. The correspondent concerned fell victim to the fundamental flaw in rolling news, which is it knows more than it shows. It just shows and shows and shows. And he speculated. Well, you should never speculate. Yeah. And I never did. So I think as course correction has to be made. But the coverage has been, they've got 5 or 6 or 7 correspondents. Can I say it's a news channel, not an opinion channel?
It is, that's right. It is a news channel. And so, but it was just, I guess they should be, we all make mistakes.
Yeah, sure.
But at that particular moment, it was so critical. I mean, it led to actually, a bit of a diplomatic crisis between some of the Middle Eastern states and the US president. I mean, it had serious consequences. But should, for example, Tim Davie have moved faster to recognise that actually the BBC should call Hamas a terrorist organisation?
I think every single broadcast, they repeat the mantra that the United Kingdom calls it a terrorist organisation. That's good enough for me, and I think it's good enough for most people.
OK, interesting. So we're sort of broadly agreed that you're very strong on the soft power. It does just seem to me that a lot of people around the world get a fantastic service for free that we, the British taxpayer, is paying, and maybe that is good value, but it's at this time of the sort of cost of living crisis, it sort of slightly sticks in the throat.
I feel as a British taxpayer that it is in my interest that the world is better informed, and the BBC helps that.
So are you still happy that it's a compulsory licence fee, or do you think there should be like a shopping list of menu items? So if you want to buy the news, you could buy the news and other channels within the BBC group.
I think it has benefited our country and our people over 100 years to have the existing funding model. You can fiddle a bit around the edges, but don't damage the core of it. There's too much at stake.
Don't damage the core of it. Absolutely fantastic. No, I think that's right. I just think that a lot of people feel the compulsion to it in this day of world is too much. Martin Bell, thank you so much. Great to see you. Really appreciate you coming in the studio. That, folks, is Martin Bell, of course, a former BBC war correspondent, former independent member of Parliament. That is no easy thing in the first-past-the-post electoral system we have. What a show we've had. I mean, just extraordinary. We've been looking at the latest government's plans to take back control, and we're looking at the illegal working crisis. But, of course, the song Bell and Sperling signing a jungle version of Nigel Says. Just listen to this. See what you think.
Nigel's in the jungle with a couple of snakes. Some seem genuine and some might be fakes. So I wanna be king of the jungle. Some might not like my views, but I'll keep winning awards for my show on GB News. Eating camel anus is a pain in the neck, just like the snidey comments from Ant and Dec. When I get out of here, I'm looking forward to a pint of beer, some roast beef and a chat with Linda and Keith. Hey, 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 Nigel says, vote Remain. I want to be king of the jungle. Nigel says, I know it sounds insane, but you really should vote Remain and make me king of the jungle. Nigel says.
I'm asking you, please, to vote Remain.
Nigel says.
No, I mean it. Please vote.
Nigel says.
For me to remain in the jungle.
He's Nigel Farage.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. It's been a bit of a grim day for many parts of the UK. The rain eases over the next 24 hours, only gradually, however, and then clearer and colder weather returns to the UK, albeit briefly, before further areas of low pressure come our way later this week. So the first area of low pressure is clearing. It's clearing to the southeast. Wrapped around it, a number of occluded fronts. That means bands of rain continuing for southern Scotland, northern England, into the Midlands, parts of Wales and the southwest, also seeing a number of showers overnight. But the more persistent rain is gradually easing. Northern Scotland, meanwhile, sees quite low temperatures overnight. Temperatures down to -5°C in places, and with some showers feeding in overnight as well. There'll be a few slippery surfaces first thing on Tuesday to watch out for. But that's where the brightest weather will be, and that brighter weather will spread into southern Scotland, much of Northern Ireland, western England and Wales by the afternoon. Central and eastern England still subject to outbreaks of rain or showers even into the afternoon, and staying cool here with the breeze from the North Sea. But then the rain clears widely and an overnight frost returns to many places by the start of Wednesday. Some freezing fog patches as well, but actually it's a bright day for many.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good evening. It's me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, on State of the Nation tonight.